Welcome to another episode of the No Money But Dreams podcast. Today we are going to be talking about someone who is extremely interesting called Naval and some of his philosophies, which we found out about recently, and how they kind of apply to work or life for us at the moment. And I think that it's something that's extremely valuable for people to listen to. Hopefully we can condense the ideas into a more bite-sized offering, and hopefully this inspires some of you.
Yeah, Naval Ravikant is someone that in Silicon Valley is very well renowned. He's the CEO of AngelList, has done a number of fantastic things. And I went down a rabbit hole after I listened to a different podcast where he was mentioned.
Yep.
And came across his ideas. He's big on Twitter. He's got loads of really interesting threads there. And you had come across him as well.
Yeah, so I actually had come across his Twitter page about a year ago, but I thought that he was some sort of like crypto bro who had a 2 million following or something like that. I didn't know that he was the CEO of AngelList, nor did I know that some of the philosophies and the book that he wrote, also the Almanac of Naval, I didn't know anything about that in the past 2-3 days. I've been doing research after that podcast we listened to and was blown away by some of the concepts. And I think that the key concept that we had heard, which got us interested, was this idea of leverage. So fundamentally, leverage is the ability to do more with less and the ability to create something that can be scaled over time, generating increasing returns.
Which in my industry, in trading, I'm very used to leverage, and that's the only leverage that I really had thought about, right? You put a little bit of money.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
You put a little bit of money and you get a bigger kind of position. The same as buying a house. You put a down payment, but the bank gives you the rest of the money, so you can't actually buy the whole house. You're getting leverage and you're paying for that leverage usually.
And I think the key point there, especially in property, is that, let's go back. A lot of wealth has been created through leverage.
Yeah.
Right? Taking $100,000 to purchase an asset which is worth, let's say, $1 million, and then that asset appreciates to $1.5 million, you've actually appreciated 500 on your 1 million asset by only putting 100.
Yeah.
Minus any interest or anything like that. But I think that really simplifies it.
And this is leverage that everyone understands,
Yes.
right? Because it's been passed down from generations. It's very easy to understand. Now, the leverage that he talks about 4 different kind of concepts of leverage. Code, capital, media, and network. And we want to chat a little bit about each of them and where we see the kind of opportunities. Code is the first one. The leverage of kind of software engineering and what has been really hot the last kind of 10 years, right? The people in Silicon Valley that could command really high salaries are the software engineers that can write code, right? Which is kind of changing now because of the whole AI coming out, and it'll be interesting to see what in the next 3 to 5 years happens, whether coding will become a commodity or they will become a lot more efficient because of the use of AI.
I mean, we discussed that in one of the recent podcasts, and I think that it is going to be commoditized.
Yeah, so that's the first one. That's what you can use as leverage because it's permissionless, right? You can go and code anything. No one needs to give you permission that you're allowed to do this or you don't need money for it, nothing. You just need to sit in front of a computer and code, which is a leverage that you can then create an amazing company. Facebook, all these other kind of companies were built on the ability of using code as one form of leverage, right? But then it also, like you and I, we're more from the business side, we don't have a coding background, and a lot of people listening won't have a coding background, and that's kind of like something that is out there, but it's not really accessible.
Yeah, so when I looked at it, I saw that as the third one, and a more recent one, coming back to the code. But there were 2 more earlier kind of leverages, which I had researched or found out about. And the first one was labor.
Yep.
So humans working for you. That's the first leverage. You pay somebody to do something for you and you make a profit on it. I think that is kind of like the oldest form of leverage and the most traditional that we can think about. You think about owning a business, you have people who are doing things for you, you can sit back while you make money. But the problem is that you have to manage all these people in order for them to create the value for you. And that can get really messy. I mean, I can tell you that from running a restaurant that, man, you have 100 egos, you have 100 people's opinions, You have to deal with drama like it's a TV show, you know? So that can be really messy. And yes, that's a form of leverage, but I think that that's an old, archaic form of leverage now. Like new businesses wouldn't necessarily be looking at labor as a really, really strong form of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second one is money. So we all know that every time you make a decision, you can multiply it with money. So if you decide to buy one house and you make money, you could have, if you had more, bought 3 houses and made 3 times the amount of money. I think that also kind of ties into leverage on a trading platform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you bet $100 that a stock is going to go up, or 300, your gain is proportional to what you risk.
Yeah, but the problem with labor and with capital, labor is kind of like, if you're in the corporate world and you talk about labor, then someone needs to give you the permission so that you get
100%.
labor, right? Like you don't wake up and you're a manager. You need to work to that level, and then you need to convince someone that says, okay, what this guy is doing right, we're going to give him a team and he's going to try and make it better.
And then you have to convince the team to follow you.
Exactly.
That's the second part.
So it's much more difficult to get labor to work for you, right?
100%.
Capital, the same thing. Like if you're raising for an idea, or you need to make the capital first to be able to then deploy it, right?
But capital or money scales much easier than humans.
Yeah.
That's why how I see it in that tier. And then we come to what you're saying, which is like the coding. And he put it as, I read somewhere, products with no marginal cost of replication. That's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, all tech products these days, right?
Exactly.
Theoretically, you create the code once and then millions of people can use it.
The only cost there, the marginal cost, is that if your dev team is too big, that could potentially hinder, you know, or something like that. But overall, yeah, exactly.
So you need to maintain the code. You don't just write it once. You need to maintain and improve the product and stuff. But you could get a lot more users with very little amount of extra capital.
Exactly,
deployed.
Especially compared to if you're running a factory, for example, or a burger joint. Every time I want to have a marginal increase in my revenue, obviously at a certain point in a certain market and certain demographic, I need to go and open another shop.
Yeah.
That means I need to be constantly reinvesting my retained earnings or my profit back into the business.
Yeah.
Whereas a more leverage focused on code, you're able to actually take the money and either pay dividends, or you don't necessarily have to keep reinvesting it into capital expenditure to make more money.
Yeah. And then we get to the next one, which excites you, which is?
Oh, tell me. I don't.
Media.
Media. Yeah.
Yeah. So media is basically using media as your leverage, whether you're creating a podcast or...
This is what we're trying to do here.
Yes. Or, you know, you have a YouTube channel, you create a product that can then be used as leverage for many, many people to see you. Instead of speaking to one-on-one or in a classroom, now millions of people can see you, or millions of people can consume your content.
Yeah, and I think that coding and media are way more democratic than labor and capital.
Yeah.
And I think this has unlocked a whole new tier of possibilities for entrepreneurs, regardless of their background, regardless of how much money they have, to not only, you know, reach an audience, but in the end, they can sell something to that audience. And I think this point of permissionless is even more pertinent here, that you don't need anybody to tell you anything in order to just post, you know, a video, post a podcast, do anything like this. So when you look back, if you look at like the printing press, then you had traditional media. Like slowly it's become more democratized to the point where you can reach 1 million, 2 million people with the phone in your pocket. And that unlocks unlimited opportunities and possibilities, which I think are
the craziest story that I heard recently was a guy was using ChatGPT as their media agency, social media agency, and he basically asked for a plan to get from 0 to 100,000 followers, and executed, and within 90 days he reached the goal, and he's now above the goal.
Whoa.
Right, that's
crazy. Smart, man. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that when I get home.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so it just gave him the content ideas, give me the hooks, give me the scripts that I should be talking about, and that's it.
So when you reach this permissionless leverage that we're talking about, what's interesting is that you're able to multiply your efforts without involving other humans and without involving or needing other people's money. And I think that is the great unlock there that he's been talking about and banging on about.
Yeah, I mean, it gives, no one can use an excuse anymore to just get started and do it, right? Everyone can do it. I mean, if we can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Right? And
but sorry to cut you off, but I've noticed recently how many people are so shy to go on video. People are just
it's
genuinely...
easy for you to say because you've been doing this for 5, 6 years.
I know, but when you're looking at the value that you can offer or how much you can command in a price, or you're building a business, you always want to look for places where people are not there, or it's difficult for them to do it. And in this, you almost have this like social element, like what are people going to think? Defensible moat, because I don't care what anybody thinks, for example. And that's not the same case when you're younger, but as you get older. You also have people that it takes time to find your voice. You know what I mean? Hormozy speaks about this. And he said, I think he was like, you look at me and I've done, God knows, you think I just blew up overnight. This is episode 522.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The guy's been banging out content. And if you go back and look at the old content, it's nothing like the content that it is today, but he's found his voice. He's found the audience.
Repetition, training.
It's the same thing as anything else to do, you know? But so many people are not willing to put in the time, you know, and get that, the instant gratification of having, I don't know how many views or how many followers or whatever. You have to just keep pushing at it, you know, and a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's all about the goals, right? If you go in there and say, oh, I want to be famous or whatever, that's kind of like the wrong starting point. In my opinion, you should be doing something that you actually enjoy doing. Like, I enjoy our conversations. I enjoy the topics that we talk about. So it doesn't feel like work or whatever. It's not a big commitment for me, right? And if it blows up, it blows up. If it doesn't blow up, we just continue.
But I think the old ideology is that I want to use this technology to be famous or this leverage to be famous. Now it's, how can I build a business around doing something that I enjoy doing? And if you enjoy doing it, it will be natural. It'll be honest, and the viewer will be able to see that.
Yeah.
And that's what people want. They want something genuine, you know?
Yeah.
The whole content space has changed into people just having a genuine conversation about stuff, you know, or genuinely showing what they're doing or talking about. And I think it's a really interesting, and this guy really puts it into perspective in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and then he talks about network and the leverage of relationships.
I mean, that's a huge one.
And it's an old one, right? If you're born into the right kind of networks, it should be easier for you to navigate through life and whatever. But like with the internet and with DMs and with cold emails, cold calls, all of that, if you really want, you can create yourself a network and get into the right kind of people to get ahead.
Not only do you have inbound people contacting you and saying like, I really like the content you're making, or this really clicked with me, can I have a conversation or can I meet you? To you also being able to approach somebody, you know, even like some people with a huge following and you think, oh, he'll never have time. You can message them and they'll message you back, whether it's the team or the individual. And you could technically, if you said the right things, there's no barriers there. You could have a meeting and you don't know what opportunity that could lead to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then, I mean, that's still pretty basic kind of stuff, right? But what I found really interesting in this idea of these different kind of leverages is stacking them, right? And building something where you stack, whether it's labor, capital, and media, all on top of each other, right? Or code and media and whatever it is. But stacking them on top of each other and giving yourself more of an advantage and more leverage, multiplying the leverages together. That's a really interesting kind of idea. How can you construct something where you're using 2 or 3 of these elements to try and get ahead?
Did you think of possibly anything that you could do around that? Like how you could stack some things together?
Yeah, I mean, you know, media is one thing, combined with capital, combined with you know, the labor aspect or the network aspect. You can apply this, anyone viewing can apply this to their kind of situation and can say, actually, I think I could be good here. I'm someone that's good in coding, but I probably I don't have the money, or I don't have a media presence yet. I do think I want to, you know, create this idea in a couple of years, and that's why I'm now going to invest 6 months, a year to kind of build my persona around this, you know?
Yeah, agreed. I think Another thing which struck me was that coding, writing books, podcasts, Twitter, YouTube, social media, yes, they're permissionless, and it's a great equalizer of leverage in the frame that he's talking about. But what is more apparent is that once that content is created, it starts to accrue value, even when you're doing nothing, you know?
Digital real estate.
Exactly.
Right?
I was
you could
exactly
be sleeping, and I mean, now Hermosi and all these kind of guys, once you have a few, or let's take music artists, right? If you've got a catalog of different songs on Spotify, they just keep playing. People will play them all around the world.
Exactly.
Right? And every another song that you add to it, or every other YouTube video that you add to it, you get more and more views.
Yeah, you almost have like network effects as well. You know what I mean? The more people who watch, the more people consume, the more valuable it's becoming.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of figuring out how to monetize that value. But the reference to real estate, everybody always says like, buy an asset and then it will make you money. You know what I mean? While you're sleeping. And everybody says, okay, if I have a building, for example, I can sleep and I'm still getting paid rent. But the same thing also accrues with the value in creating content, especially evergreen content that people can constantly consume and is always relevant. You can't maybe like measure the value that it is right now, but it's only going to become more valuable, you know, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. And a lot of these content areas were still very early, right? Like if you're talking about AI constantly, there's a guy on LinkedIn that I follow that went literally from 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers.
Being an expert in AI.
Being an expert in AI. He just does, he analyzed, you know, the carousels and how many times he needs to post, how long the post needs to be. He commented on 50 different people's posts every single day for a year.
Wow.
And that's how he got so much reach now that he has 100,000 people following him, and that just quit his day job. He can now fully focus on content and is making money that way.
That's incredible, man.
Right? Yeah, but it's the hours put into, like, who wants to really go and comment on 50 people's posts every single day? Especially if you're in a work environment, people at work are going to start laughing at you because you see what your connections are posting to, right? So having that vision and saying, you know, I'm going to stick to this and I'm going to really understand the algo, really understand how on this platform or on multiple platforms I can really leverage media as my thing to then position yourself.
I think a lot of people sitting watching this who do have a day job and are working in the corporate world or in the corporate ladder and feel that they want to enter into this space, they need to just let go of what other people are going to think initially. You know what I mean? And it's not for everybody. You know, it takes a strong stomach to stand against the crowd. But 9 times out of 10, if you do the opposite what everybody else is doing, that's where the value is. That's where the value unlock is, and that's where ultimately happiness is. Not necessarily monetarily, but maybe dealing with your time. How do you spend your time? You know, if we come back to, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and these kinds of concepts, wealthy people invest in assets which increase in value. You know, poor people spend all their money. That kind of narrative, which comes into Hormozi sometimes, but a lot of different people talk about it. Creating a piece of content that's forever accruing value, you never ever have to give your time again to monetize on that. You know what I mean? Whatever the value is, you never have to give another second of your life to that video for it to accrue value. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
To think of it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and coming up with combinations of leverage to just increase more leverage so that you don't have to work till 65 or whatever, and you can shortcut your way into something and really sitting down and saying, you know, I want to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to take some time and I'm not going to care what everyone else is going to think.
Yeah. I think especially now, even as a secondary side hustle, like we are in an age, especially, I realized the other day I was having a conversation where I never appreciated what inflation was, because when you're 25, you didn't know what inflation was at 15, for example, or 18. But at 25, you knew what the average cost of A, B, C, D, F, G is. And then at 35, to look at the difference in the cost of a car, of houses, of everything, over that 10-year period, you go, whoa. Like literally, if I just kept money, it's worth nothing. It's unbelievable. So it's important, man, I think.
Yeah.
In order to figure out all these nuances, I don't know. Yeah, that was my 2 cents at least.
Yeah. Good. I hope we got people thinking about what they can do and how they can.
Yeah, and check him out.
leverages.
In the show notes, we'll write the name of the book on Amazon. You can, if you want to support the podcast, you can buy it. No, joking. And we'll also put some other show notes in there and some other interesting podcasts that we listened to before we did this episode.
Yeah, definitely check him out. He's a really interesting guy.
Thank you for listening. Take it easy.